So the main question or thing that I want to talk to you about is yesterday I heard you having a conversation with a number of gentlemen, and you were explaining to them that there are perspectives and truth is not absolute, and safety and privacy and control and what is and isn't survivor-centered. And that appeals to me in my context as a woman in technology. I started coding like 17 years ago, and until last year I did not really identify as a woman in tech, but oh my god, I am. And so recently I started running ally skills workshops that train men in technology how to support women in technology.
Oh, that's great.
Right? And all of the same concepts are there, and how do you help bring people to that space? Because I heard you recognize that you have to deal with people where they are. You can't necessarily jar them with the truth, because then they shut down and get defensive.
Right.
How do you, in your work, help people understand those concepts and teach?
Right. I can tell you how I try. I mean, you have to ask them if I succeeded. But I think in some ways it's all the same thing. It's empathy. It's the same thing as meeting somebody where they're at. Being trauma informed is paying attention to the fact that you work with trauma victims, and different people respond to trauma differently, so you're prepared. Like, to a certain extent, it's about flexibility. And so both what I'm asking people to do is about flexibility, and therefore I have to model flexibility when I'm talking to them about it. One of the people that I was talking to yesterday asked, in all seriousness, so aren't most domestic violence shelters encouraging people to reconcile? And 10 years ago I would have blown a nut at that. But yesterday it turned out that he was unintentionally hooking into a concern of mine, which is that the mandate to separate from your abuser has become so strong that we've become unable to meet any survivor where they're at. So when that survivor says, what I want is no more violence and my family held together, do you have any solutions for that? We have none. We haven't researched any. We haven't developed any. We don't have to spend any money on any, because we've decided the only solution is separation. So when he said, isn't it always better to reconcile, I was able in my own head to just think, was there any piece of that I agree with, and can I communicate to him the part that I agree with? And so I tried to just have a conversation with him about sometimes reconciling is what people want because they have children together, because of their community, because it's less safe to be separate because of poverty. And sometimes what people want is they're very unsafe being together, and they want, in fact, to be separated, and that's the right thing.
How do you get the individuals you're talking to yesterday to a place where they can understand the relativity of everything, right?
Right. That's a really good question. I mean, first you have to model it, so you have to listen to them, and you have to learn more about where they're coming from and why they're saying what they're saying, expressing what they're expressing, what does it really mean to them. That allows you to formulate a response that's going to be easiest for them to hear, but it also softens them up because they feel heard, so then they're more willing to do that, like social respect of paying back by hearing you.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the number one thing. It's like you're just sort of displaying exactly the behavior we want, which is I want to understand better where you were at. You talk to people about just investigating, learning, and asking questions, not assuming or judging or implementing. You hold your temper, which is not my strong suit, but I'm working on it. The other thing I think that's going on that's very political, that is complicated to address, is I think there's a level of othering going on where, well, there's one of two things going on. There's either, for my situation, like if it's domestic violence survivors, people either assume that domestic violence survivors are all poor, uneducated, powerless,
Uneducated.
weak, exactly, that they have no abilities. And so if you sort of say, well, that's actually not everybody who experiences this, and how would you feel if it was your neighbor or your sister? Like, would you want your personal information to be spread all over the place because it's going to help you? But the flip side is what some people do is, like when you're designing solutions. So here's what's weird. When you're designing how you should behave, I find people assuming that domestic violence survivors are all these sort of like other, people we feel sorry for, but we don't recognize or feel any commonality with. But when we're designing solutions, we tend to assume everybody has the knowledge and capacities that we have. So that's a political problem. That's, when we are seeing powerlessness, we see someone else. And when we're developing power, we see ourselves.
Yes.
And so you have to, just by hook or by crook, shift that dynamic and say, but it's not necessarily someone else, it's you. And one of the things I do around domestic violence, around the othering, that shocks people. I have two sort of stock things that I say. One is Joe Biden is famous for getting up in Congress in the 90s and saying, these are our mothers, these are our sisters, these are our daughters, we have to care. And I say what he should have gotten up and said was, these are our brothers, these are our fathers, these are our sons who are committing these crimes. We have to figure out how to take action. And then the second thing I say is I say, my great-grandmother was the victim of severe domestic violence. My great-grandfather perpetrated it. I'm in this business as much for him as I am for her because I don't believe that that's who he wanted to be. And so I want to live in a world that facilitates him not being that, not just facilitates what you're having.
The piece yesterday where you were like, you kept being like, no, you don't understand. Like this could be true, this could be true, you don't know yet. Mm-hmm. Or it reminds me of a conversation that there's this whole idea of like, anytime you're talking about women in tech, it's men and qualified women. It's not just women, and it's not qualified men. It's just qualified women and men. And because obviously the unqualified women should not be part of the conversation, right? And I did a workshop on Tuesday, and there was this guy who just like thought it mattered whether in the scenario that I gave that I was trying to talk through like what they would do and how they would handle it. It was just like it matters whether she's qualified. Like he couldn't get around that fact. Like he was fixated on it. Like that mattered in terms of how he needed to respond. And I was like, no, actually it doesn't matter. You hired her.
Right.
It doesn't matter whether she's qualified or not. You now hired her. It's now your job to support her in any way that you can. But he was like, if she's unqualified, we fire her. Right. And if she is qualified, then she doesn't need any help. And I was like, it doesn't matter.
So here's what I would do with someone like him, is I would say to him, what are the elements of being qualified? Like, what are those things? Partially because you're listening and you're trying to get a better understanding of where he's coming from, and partially because it's part mediator trick, part trial lawyer trick. So the mediator part is like, I want to hear you, I want to understand you. The trial lawyer is, and I'm going to stick you with what you said. So if you give a list of what counts as qualified, and there's something on it that is ridiculous, and you never know, right? I mean, you hear ridiculous things like, can she be one of the guys? It's a quote, like it wouldn't surprise me to hear someone say that's an element of being qualified.
Oh, that's culture fit.
Right.
Yes.
So to just engage them in a conversation, like, well, what is it? If it's useful, there's really two things. Some of that's about group dynamics. So if he's a saboteur, then it's I would love to talk to you more about this after. Okay. And then you're willing to do it, and you talk to him about it after, but you take it offline so that you can keep control of the group. But if it's actually helping the group, then you engage, because you figure if one person says it, 10 people are thinking
that.
it.
Yeah, exactly.
And just listen. It's weird because I feel like there's a level on which women have been told forever that they should listen and take care of other people, and so sometimes it feels like empowerment is like, I don't have to be any nicer than you have to be. But then there's also a large group of powerful men who are coming to realize that the skills that women have always been taught are useful and valuable to them. So it's been this weird cycle. The Harvard Negotiation Project putting out a series of books, mostly written by men, about the way that you solve problems in high-level, multi-billion-dollar negotiations is by listening to the other person, by understanding what they care about, by respecting the value of their goals, and by having a really keen sense of your own goals and trying to find a match between those two, which it's like Carol Gilligan. But they don't attribute it, and
Of
I think if
course
you would
not.
say to them, they would
Oh
never
no,
do
this is them having a light bulb moment.
Right, exactly. So all of that is to say, I think it may be a sign, it would be nice if they would acknowledge that, like, oh, these are the skills that women have actually been encouraged to develop for years and years and years. They're not doing that. But it might be a sign of that valuing of skills that women bring to the table that we've often been wishing was part of. Tell me more about that. Did you say it's called the Alice Guild?
It's the Ally Skills Workshop.
Okay.
It was originally developed by a C3 called the 8 Initiative that no longer exists anymore. But they open sourced their curriculum before they ended. I did 2 workshops in February. I just did the one in March, and I'll do one in April. I'm also being paid to do one in Grand Rapids in April. And I've already changed it relatively significantly. And I will continue to change it, and kind of, because there's 2 things that I need from men in technology. One, I need actual leaders, not just like lead developers who've been promoted to manager and like have no idea what they're doing. I'm definitely not a leader. And 2, I need men to speak up. Right. I cannot always be the one fighting. And the only way I know how to do that is to train, and so I am training. But having trained before, I mean, I started as a trainer in queer space. Like, we don't use the word homosexual, and this is what the word transgender means, right? And having those conversations and making it human for people, and like dealing with people where they are, and all of those lessons. And then that goes into software training, and now I'm doing like gender tech training.
So there's a Train the Trainer that you might love. It's put on by a group called Catharsis Productions, and
I like it already.
So Catharsis is fantastic because they work on preventing sexual assault. Their training is aimed at the people who perpetrate sexual assault, but in communities. So in other words, it's like campus. So they mostly do campus and military. And it's sort of everybody comes together, and they use sketch comedy to get sort of regular social interactions out on the table that are actually part of rape culture, right? That nobody thinks are part of rape culture. So they get it out on the table, they get people laughing, they get people talking, they get people reevaluating their own behavior. They talk to them about speaking out, not speaking out to keep her safe, but speaking out to tell him, dude, that's not okay. And so Catharsis is fantastic. But the founder, Gail Stern, created a training for trainers who are doing, originally for people who are doing sexual assault education, but it's for anybody who's doing that kind of like gender revolutionary training in tough spaces. And how do you handle hecklers and saboteurs, or people who are honestly expressing a conflicting idea and working it out will help you. How do you plan for it? And what I like about it is that she's an actor and comedian background, so she uses theater techniques to have you develop your training. Like you come multiple times and you have to deliver it. You get recorded. You get comments and director's notes, and then you deliver it again. And you get director's notes and comments, and you deliver it again. So if you go on Catharsis Productions website, they have 3 boxes you can click, and one of them is for Train the Trainer. It has a great name. She used to call it the Buffy Institute. Oh, it's called the Force of Awesome Institute. Okay. It was the Buffy Institute for a while, but then they called it Force of Awesome.
That's nice.
So I think you'd find it really
I love this idea.